Hi, and welcome back to Curvy Creek Farm. Today I'm going to show you how I make the very best buttermilk biscuits from scratch. It's almost as easy as popping open a can of biscuits, but it's definitely better tasting and certainly better for you. I've been making biscuits pretty much my entire life, but about 5 years ago I stumbled upon this recipe and it kind of changed my biscuit making life. So I thought I would share it with you today. So if you're interested in learning maybe a new biscuit recipe, stick around. Let's get started. The recipe that I'm using calls for 2.5 cups of all-purpose flour, 3 teaspoons of baking soda, a teaspoon of salt, 2 teaspoons of sugar, a stick of butter, and about a cup of buttermilk. Sometimes you use a little more, sometimes you use a little less. You just kind of have to judge it. And that's all. That's all that's in this delicious buttermilk biscuit recipe. Okay, so now let's get our dry ingredients together. I usually like to sift my biscuits. It's not necessarily something you have to do, but I feel like sifting it kind of fluffs up your flour and it makes for a lighter, fluffier biscuit. So I'm going to sift together. Now this is 2.5 cups of all-purpose flour. Put that in my sifter. Okay. Then I need 2 teaspoons of sugar. This is organic sugar, pure cane sugar, so that's why it looks a little brown. Okay, so I've got my sugar. I need 3 teaspoons of baking powder. I like to use the Rumford baking powder because it doesn't have aluminum in it and it's a little bit better for you. I also need a teaspoon of salt. And so that's all for our dry ingredients. Now I'm just going to sift them all together. Okay, so I've got this all sifted together, all of my dry ingredients. Now the next step is going to be to cut in our ice cold butter. I said one of the key things about having really good biscuits is a hot oven. My oven just came to temperature to 450. Another key to really good biscuits is to have very, very, very cold butter. So I cut my butter into pieces and I stuck it in the freezer, for about 5 minutes. So let's pull that out. Okay, so I've been seeing a lot of people using a cheese grater to cut up their butter into their biscuits, and that's fine, but I just felt like that's one more thing for me to wash. So I decided today to just cut it up into cubes, stick it in the freezer, and let it chill back down because it had been sitting out as I was talking to you earlier. And I'm just going to cut it up into cubes. Then I just put the whole stick of butter into my flour. Kind of mess it around in there. Then I take, this is something that you don't have to have, but I really recommend if you can get a hold of a pastry cutter. When I was little, I used to just use 2 butter knives and would cut it like that. That's the way my grandmother always did it. But I have a pastry cutter, so I'm going to use my pastry cutter and I'm just going to start cutting the butter into the flour. Just cut it up until those chunks that I had it cut into start to resemble, they always say, make it look like it is pea-shaped. And also sometimes they'll tell you to look for it to be the consistency of cornmeal. I actually go a little bit thicker, a little bit larger pebble looking pieces. Okay, so you can kind of see that my butter is in the shape of what I kind of just think looks like little peas. And what that is, these little pieces of butter are going to melt when it gets into that hot oven. They will melt, and that's what causes all your beautiful flakes in your biscuit. Okay, so as I sort of stir it up a little bit, I'm going to make myself a hole, and into that hole I'm going to put a cup. I'm going to start with about 3/4 of a cup of buttermilk. So let me get the buttermilk out of the fridge. Again, I want to keep that really cold. I'll start off with, about 3/4 of a cup, and I'll see if that is going to be enough. Okay, and you see it fills up that hole there. So let's just start very gently stirring up your buttermilk into your flour. Oh, that's definitely not going to be enough buttermilk. You can see there's still all sorts of dry ingredients in here. Now, you don't want to get it too wet, but it's easier to add than it is to take away. So I just put it a little at a time until it starts to form a ball, and it's not even there yet. That's what I'm saying. Really, you can't go by an exact measurement. You just aren't sure. Okay, that's starting to look like it might be wet enough. Maybe one more little teaspoon, more like a tablespoon. Okay, yeah, there we go. Okay, so I have a silicone mat here, and I'm just going to flour it just very slightly, just so my biscuits won't stick. And I'm going to, now make sure that you have good clean hands, obviously. You don't want to not have washed your hands before you start cooking ever. Now, you can tell it's not mixed up. It's still not mixed up. So I just usually go through and gather up all the extras I can find. And I just very, very, very gently start working it together. It's almost, in my mind, I almost kind of feel like I'm making a pie crust, because, you know, you really don't want to work a pie crust much at all, or it gets tough. And I feel the same way about biscuits. So you see that I still have a ton of stuff that is not really worked in very good. The more that you can not touch your biscuit mix, the better, because the more you touch it, the more you're going to melt that butter. So I usually just start folding it gently. I'm not kneading it, because if I kneaded it, I would make it tough. So I just fold it until things start to kind of come together. As I fold it, I sort of turn it and gather up all the extra pieces that I need to get incorporated. And I turn it over multiple times. And I just keep working it until I get in all of these little pieces. Now, when I've seen that I've got pretty much everything in it that I'm going to be able to incorporate, I still see that I've got lots of big chunks of butter, which is good. That's what we want. I start flattening it out with my hands. Now, I don't use a rolling pin. I just flatten it with my hands. Now, for years and years and years, I would flatten it out pretty thin. And then when my biscuits would come out, I would wonder, why don't I have those good big thick biscuits that are all fluffy looking? And then one day it just hit me. I was like, well, it's because you're rolling it out too thin and you are making your biscuits too thin. So from then on, I started making them a lot thicker, cutting them a lot thicker than I ever would have in the past. And it started working and making really nice, big, fluffy biscuits. So you'll notice a couple of times I flatten it out, then I fold it over. Now, throughout this process, you might have to add a little bit more flour to the bottom to keep it from sticking, and that's okay. You just don't want to add a whole big lot. Okay, so now I'm going to really start patting it out to get to where I'm going to start cutting. Okay, now I have it ready to cut. Some people might use maybe the mouth of a jar or a glass, but I found that this really sharp edge of a cookie cutter or this is a biscuit cutter, but I found that sharp edge is what helps it. You don't want to push it down and twist. For years, I think, for some reason, I would always push and twist, but what that was doing was it was sealing in the edges of my biscuit and it was causing it to go outward instead of upward. So I learned that you just push down and pull straight back up. All right, so let me get my pan. Now you can also bake these in a cast iron skillet if you wanted to, but I really like these USA pans. I've been picking up lots and lots of different shapes and sizes of these. This is a perfect biscuit baker pan. So, you don't grease it, you don't do anything to it. Trust me, there's enough butter in your biscuit. It's not going to stick. So I go straight down and pull straight back up. And that's about the size that I make my biscuits. When I put my biscuits in my pan, I also have them almost touch because that gives them some room to bake, but it also causes them to bake together and they push each other up. So I might want to pat it out just a little bit more. It might be a little thick there in the middle. Okay. And one thing that I've learned through the years, if they taste good, it really doesn't matter what they look like. So I usually always throw in that little baby biscuit. And this one's usually the one that I taste test when it comes out of the oven. Make sure you have to check it to make sure that it's good. Okay, so now I'm going to put these into the oven and I'm going to bake them at 450. Usually set my timer for 12 minutes and then I start watching them. At 12 minutes, if they are nice and golden brown, that's great. But if they're still not that good golden brown on top, and I'll show it to you in a few minutes, if they're not golden brown yet, I go ahead and let them go for just a few more minutes. I found that, okay, you can burn biscuits, but it's really hard to over bake the biscuit. So as long as it's not burning, it's okay to let it continue baking. Okay, so our biscuits are done. I'm going to pull them out and let's take a look. Ooh, those look really good. Okay. Let me show you how good these turned out. Perfect color on top. Here's our biscuit. So you know I'm going to slather on some Curvy Creek Farm honey. So let's get some honey. Let me pull this down so you can see what it looks like. Yum. Okay. That's delicious. So I hope the next time you go to your fridge and look for a can of biscuits to pop open, you think about this recipe from Curvy Creek Farm and know that it's really just as easy to whip up something from scratch that's better for your family. Thanks for stopping by, and hopefully you'll come back to Curvy Creek where you're always going to find simple living in a busy world.